The morning of April 3rd, 2024, my daughter-in-law sat across from me at the kitchen table I had refinished with my own two hands and said, "Vera, I think it's time you considered a more manageable living situation, somewhere designed for women your age. I'm Vera May Holloway. I'm 66 years old, and I want to tell you what happened next." I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I picked up my coffee mug, the one my husband Leon had given me for our 30th anniversary, with my favorite morning person painted on the side, walked to the window and looked out at the rose garden I'd planted the year we moved in. Then I said, "Let me think about that," and I went upstairs to make my bed. 2 months later, I was standing on a stone terrace overlooking the Atlantic Ocean in the Algarve region of Portugal, watching the sun set over cliffs that looked like something out of a painting, drinking a glass of local wine that cost less than a fast food combo meal back home. My son was calling for the 11th time that week. I let it ring. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Vera May Holloway, née Washington. I spent 28 years working as a registered nurse at Emory University Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. I worked nights. I worked holidays. I worked the week my mother died because the unit was short-staffed and I was the charge nurse, and I didn't know how to say, "I can't right now, I'm falling apart." I mention this because my daughter-in-law, a woman named Jade, once told her friends on a group chat I wasn't supposed to see that I had never really had a career, just a job. She said this while sitting on the couch I owned in the house I owned, eating the dinner I cooked, all while my son Marcus nodded along like his backbone had been surgically removed. Leon Holloway died on September 12, 2021. Congestive heart failure. He'd had a mild heart attack in 2018, managed it, changed his diet, started walking every morning. We thought we had more time. Most people do. He was 68. We had 34 years together, and I would take every single one of them again, even the hard ones, even the years when the kids were little and money was thin, and we argued about things so small I can't remember what they were now. He was a good man, a steady man, the kind of man who fixed things before you knew they were broken. Our son Marcus came home for the funeral. He was 34 then, working in commercial real estate in Charlotte, driving a truck he was 2 payments behind on, engaged to Jade Bennett, who had opinions about everything and experience with nothing. "Mum," he said 3 days after we buried Leon, sitting at my kitchen table drinking the coffee I made for him. "We need to talk about the house. I live in a 4-bedroom brick colonial on Sycamore Drive in Decatur, Georgia. Leon and I bought it in 1994 for $112,000. It had good bones and a bad kitchen and a backyard that was pure Georgia red clay. We put 20 years of work into it. The neighborhood changed, like neighborhoods do. Families like ours, who'd stayed through the lean years, watched the property values climb. By 2021, comparable homes on our street were selling for $600,000. "What about it?" I asked Marcus. "Mum, the taxes on this place alone are over $7,000 a year. You're on a fixed income now. And there's still equity tied up here that could be working for you." He pulled out papers. His voice was gentle. Too gentle. The way you talk to someone you've already decided is a problem to be managed. "I've been talking to a financial planner. If we put the house in a family trust, with me as the managing trustee, it protects it from probate and simplifies things down the road. You'd still live here. Nothing changes for you." I was 63 years old and I had buried my husband 11 days earlier, and I was so deep in grief I couldn't taste food. And this was my son, my baby. The boy who used to fall asleep on my chest during thunderstorms. I signed the papers. I did not read them carefully enough. For the first year, Marcus called every Sunday. Jade came to Thanksgiving and Christmas, photographed my food for her Instagram without asking, and referred to my house as Marcus's family home in captions that used words like legacy and roots. I told myself she meant well. I was very good at telling myself things. In January 2023, Marcus called with a favor. Mom, Jade and I have been looking at properties, but the market is brutal right now and we're hemorrhaging money on rent. Could we stay with you just until we save enough for a down payment? 6 months, maybe 8? We'd cover utilities. I had 4 bedrooms and a grief that had made the house feel like a museum. Of course, I said, stay as long as you need. They arrived February 1st, 2023. Marcus brought 2 suitcases and a TV I didn't need. Jade brought her ring light, her content creation setup, her collection of crystals, and an energy that made every room feel slightly smaller. She was 29, a wellness content creator with 40,000 Instagram followers and a subscription Substack about intentional living. She ate anti-inflammatory everything. She had a morning routine that started at 5:30 and involved, as far as I could tell, a lot of expensive powders and a journal that cost $45. She called herself an entrepreneur. She made on a good month around $2,000. The changes started the way they always do with people like Jade, gradually, then all at once. First, the guest room became her filming space because the natural light was better. My mother's quilt went to the hallway closet. Then my sewing table had to move to the basement because the corner where it sat was aesthetically disruptive to the content zone. I'd been sewing at that table since 1989. I said nothing. Jade had a way of framing every inconvenience as being for my benefit. Vera, the kitchen really flows better when we keep the counter clear for food prep, by which she meant stop leaving your coffee maker out. Vera, I read that nightshades can cause inflammation in older adults, by which she meant I'm not eating your stuffed peppers. Vera, clutter is genuinely linked to cortisol spikes, by which she meant your 35 years of accumulated life makes me uncomfortable. Marcus said nothing. My son, who used to call me his first best friend, watched his wife rearrange my home around her content schedule and said absolutely nothing. They contributed $400 a month toward groceries. The mortgage I still paid under the trust arrangement was $1,900. Property taxes, utilities, insurance, maintenance came to another $1,400 monthly. I was covering roughly $3,000 a month in household expenses. They were saving for a house. The moment that broke something open in me happened on a Sunday in March, 10 months into their temporary stay. I'd made my mother's fried chicken. The recipe came from her mother, who got it from her mother, who made it every Sunday in Birmingham, Alabama, without fail for 60 years. You brine it overnight. You season the flour 4 different ways. You use cast iron and you do not rush it. It takes most of a Sunday morning and the house smells like church and family and everything good. Jade came downstairs, looked at the spread I had laid out, and said, "Oh, Vera, that smells amazing. But we actually have a brand partnership shoot this afternoon, and I need the kitchen for a sponsored content piece. Purely plants, you know. The optics of the fried chicken in the background would kind of undercut the whole message." Then she smiled. "Maybe you could take a plate to your neighbor." She needed my kitchen for a sponsored social media post. She needed me to take my mother's cooking to someone else's house. I picked up my plate. I took it to my neighbor Claudette's house across the street. I sat in Claudette's kitchen and ate and didn't say a word about what had just happened, because I wasn't ready yet. But Claudette looked at me over her sweet tea and said, "Vera, what are we doing?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. The conversation I'd been dreading came on a Thursday morning in early April. I was in the backyard tending my roses when Jade appeared at the sliding glass door in her workout clothes, fresh from her morning routine, face glowing from whatever $70 serum she'd applied. "Vera, do you have a minute?" She sat down across from me at the patio table, hands folded, measured expression. I recognized the energy. I'd been a charge nurse. I delivered hard news to families. I knew what it looked like to prepare a speech. "Marcus and I have been talking," she said. about the future, about what makes sense for everyone. She paused. This house is a lot for one person at your stage of life. The yard work alone, the maintenance. You've been so generous having us here, but the thing is, we need to establish our own home, our own space. She tilted her head. And honestly, wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere without all the upkeep? There are some wonderful 55-plus communities around Decatur. Beaumont Gardens has independent living apartments, a pool, organized activities, people who are in the same season of life you are. The same season of life. I was 66. I still worked per diem shifts at the hospital 2 days a week because I wanted to, not because I had to. I ran a 5K with Claudette last November. I grew tomatoes and peppers and 14 varieties of roses in the backyard. But in Jade's vision of the world, I was already a storage problem to be solved. What about this house? I asked. My voice was steady. I learned steady from 30 years of nursing. She glanced sideways briefly. Well, it's in the family trust now, with Marcus as trustee, and we've been thinking that this could be the home base we've been working toward. We have such a vision for it. Jade's face lit up with genuine enthusiasm. Open concept living room, kitchen island, primary suite renovation. I've been working with a designer. We could start in the fall if you're settled somewhere by August. August. They'd been living rent-free for 14 months, and she was giving me 4 months to disappear. Marcus appeared in the doorway. He'd been standing just inside, I realized, waiting. Mom. His voice had that careful gentleness again. Jade's right. This is a practical decision. Beaumont Gardens is really nice. We took a tour. They have a computer lab, a garden club. I looked at my son. I tried to find in his face the boy I knew, the teenager who cried when our dog Biscuit died, the 20-year-old who called me from his college dorm because he'd gotten a B- and thought his life was over, and I talked him down, the man who stood at the head of his father's casket and told the congregation that his mother was the strongest person he'd ever known. I couldn't find him anywhere in the man, standing in my doorway. I see, I said. We just want what's best for everyone, Marcus said. Of course you do. I stood up. Would you excuse me? I have some phone calls to make. I went to my bedroom. I sat on Leon's side of the bed. My hands were in my lap. I was not crying. I was thinking, and I was thinking about something Leon had said to me the night before he died. He'd been tired, the kind of tired that goes into your bones, but he was lucid and he was squeezing my hand. Vera May, he said, you spent your whole life taking care of everybody else. Everything I did to make sure nobody could ever take that away from you. Promise me you'll open the lockbox before you do anything with the house. Promise me. I had promised, and then I had been too deep in grief to remember. The lockbox was on the shelf in the back of my closet, behind Leon's old Union jackets. The combination was our wedding date. I had to think for a moment. March 14th, 1987. I turned the dial. Inside was an envelope with my name in Leon's handwriting, and beneath it a folder. I sat on the floor of my closet and I read every word. My dearest Vera May, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry it took so long to tell you what I should have said years ago. I was a union electrician for 31 years. You know that. What you don't know is that I was also careful, quietly, steadily, without making a fuss about it. I built something for you. The life insurance policy, $650,000. State Farm policy number SEF28477-1I7720A. The 401k and pension, I took a lump sum conversion option in 2019. Combined value at that time was $480,000. Account details enclosed. Your name is sole beneficiary. The rental property, I bought a duplex on Glenwood Avenue in 2011 through a LLC. You don't know about this because I handled it through the union's investment club. Current value approximately $320,000. Rental income has been going to a separate account I set up in your name. Account ending in 4418 at Peach State Credit Union. You've had $26,000 accumulating there since 2021. Call Dwight Morgan at the Union Hall. He's been holding paperwork for you. And one more thing. Vera, I had an estate attorney redo our trust documents in 2020. What Marcus presented you with after I passed was not what I authorized. I spoke to Terence Cole at Cole and Associates on Auburn Avenue. He knows everything. Call him. The trust has conditions, very specific conditions. Before you do anything about the house, call Terence. I love you. I have always loved you. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, even on the days I wasn't smart enough to say so. Go somewhere beautiful. Be happy. You earned it. Leon? I sat on my closet floor for a long time. Then I stood up. I washed my face. I put on my going-to-business clothes, the grey blazer and the good slacks I wore when I needed people to take me seriously, and I made 3 phone calls. The first was to Dwight Morgan at the Union Hall. He had been expecting to hear from me for 2.5 years. The separate account in my name held $28,000 in accumulated rental income. He gave me the contact for Susan Park, the property manager who'd been sending monthly deposits. The second call was to Peach State Credit Union. I asked to see every account with my name on it. The account Leon had set up was there, so was another one I didn't recognize. A joint savings account opened April 2022, 7 months after Leon's funeral, with my name and Marcus's name. Monthly deposits from the duplex rental income had been redirected there beginning in October 2022, when Marcus changed the deposit routing with a form that apparently bore my signature. $2,000 a month for 18 months. $36,000 sitting in an account I had never seen or touched. The signature on the form was not mine. I sat in the parking lot of Peach State Credit Union for 10 minutes. Then I drove to Auburn Avenue. Terence Cole was a black man in his 60s, silver at his temples, with reading glasses on a chain and an office full of books. Leon had spoken highly of him for years. He stood up when I walked in and shook my hand and said, "Mrs. Holloway, I've been waiting for you. I'm sorry it took this long." He explained the trust clearly and slowly, the way you explain things to someone who needs to understand, not someone you're trying to confuse. Leon had commissioned a conditional trust, not a simple transfer. The home remained mine to occupy for my lifetime. Marcus was listed as successor trustee only, with fiduciary obligations toward me. He had no authority to evict me, renovate the property, or transfer ownership without my written consent. What he had told me about his rights as trustee was either a misunderstanding or a lie. Based on the rental account, Terence suspected it was the latter. "What are my options?" I asked. "You can assert your rights and stay. You can negotiate the settlement. Or," Terence leaned forward, "you can sell. The conditional language gives you the right to liquidate the property during your lifetime with trustee consent, and consent can be compelled through the courts when a trustee has engaged in financial misconduct. Given the redirected rental income and the forged signature, you have significant leverage." I thought about Jade measuring my living room for an open concept redesign. I thought about my mother's quilt in the hallway closet and my sewing table in the basement and 2 gallons of Leon's mother's banana pudding I'd made for Easter, getting pushed to the back of the refrigerator because Jade was doing a cleanse. "I want to sell," I said. "Then let's begin." The next 6 weeks I moved quietly. Terence filed the legal paperwork establishing my right to sell. My financial advisor, a woman named Paula Osei, whom Leon had worked with for years, helped me understand what I actually had. Life insurance payout, $650,000, which I had never claimed because I thought the medical bills had consumed everything. Investment and pension accounts, $492,000. Rental property value, $340,000. Accumulated rental income, including the redirected deposits Terence was in the process of recovering through the fraud claim, $64,000. total assets over $1.5 million. I had been eating store-brand coffee for 2 years to save money. I had been quietly terrified about making the mortgage. I had let my daughter-in-law tell me to take my mother's cooking to the neighbor's house. I called a realtor named Andre James who had sold 3 houses on my street in the past year. He walked through the property on a Monday morning while Marcus and Jade were both at work, which they went to approximately 4 days a week each, and said, "Mrs. Holloway, if you list this at $680, you'll have offers by Friday." "List it," I said. The first showing was the following Thursday. I told Marcus I was going to the library. While the house was listed quietly off-market, I reached out to a woman named Josephine Carter, who ran a Facebook group called Black Women Living Abroad. I'd joined the group the previous winter on a whim, during a stretch of nights when I couldn't sleep and spent too much time on my phone looking at photos of places I'd never been. Josephine had been living in the Algarve region of Portugal for 6 years. She was 61, a retired school counselor from Baltimore. She answered my message within an hour. "Girl," she wrote back, "I have been waiting for someone like you to find this group. Call me tonight." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about the cost of living, the health care, the non-habitual resident tax regime that was favorable to foreign retirees, the weather, the food, the pace of life. She told me about a villa rental in a small town called Carveiro, white stone buildings on red cliffs above a turquoise cove, that her friend was listing for long-term lease at a price that would have been laughed at by any Atlanta landlord. I video-called the property, 3 bedrooms, terracotta tile floors, a private courtyard with a lemon tree, a 10-minute walk to the beach, €2,000 a month. I sent the deposit the next morning. The house on Sycamore Drive sold in 9 days for $705,000. Cash buyers, a young couple expecting their first child, who walked through the front door and immediately said, "This is the one." I signed the papers on a Tuesday and cried in my car afterward, not from sadness, but from the pure physical release of something I had been holding for a very long time. I did not tell Marcus until Thanksgiving. I cooked for 2 days, everything my mother and grandmother had ever taught me, macaroni and cheese, the real kind, baked in the oven with a breadcrumb top, collard greens slow-cooked with smoked turkey because they don't use ham hocks anymore, but I keep the depth, candied yams with real butter and fresh orange zest, cornbread from cast iron, sweet potato pie, which my neighbor Claudette says is the best thing she has ever put in her mouth, and she has been to New Orleans 3 times. Claudette came. My friend Yolanda from the hospital came. My cousin Inez drove up from Macon. Marcus and Jade arrived at 2 in the afternoon. Jade wore a white dress and immediately took photos of every dish for her stories. Marcus ate 2 plates and said, "Mom, this is unbelievable. I'm going to miss this so much." I set down my fork. "You said you're going to miss it. What are you expecting to miss it for?" He shifted. "I mean, you know, when things change, when you move." "I haven't told you I was moving," I said. Jade looked up from her phone. "Jade gave me a timeline in April," I continued. "August," she said. "She had a designer, an open concept kitchen. Jade, do you want to tell everyone what you told me about the house in April, or should I?" The table had gone very quiet. Claudette, who knew everything, was looking at her sweet potato pie. "Mom," Marcus's voice had an edge now, "we can discuss this privately." "We can discuss it right now." I looked at my son. "You told me I could stay in my home for my lifetime. That was the condition your father put in the trust. I had it confirmed by Terence Cole, who your father hired specifically to protect me. What you've been telling me about your rights as trustee is not accurate. What you did with the Glenwood Avenue rental deposits is the subject of an active legal complaint. And the house," I paused, "sold 3 weeks ago." Jade stood up. She actually stood up. What? It closed November 1st. The new family takes possession December 15th. You have 6 weeks, which is the same timeline you gave me in April. You can't. Jade's voice was sharp. That's Marcus's house. That's our... It was my home, I said. It was never your house. And as of November 1st, it belongs to a young couple named the Washingtons. No relation, who are expecting a baby and needed more space. I hope they're very happy there. Marcus hadn't spoken. He was looking at the table. Where are you going? He finally said. Portugal. I leave December 29th. I've rented a house in the Algarve, 3 bedrooms, a courtyard, 10 minutes from the ocean. Jade said Portugal is not realistic. You don't speak the language. You don't know anyone there. You can't just... I have a visa, I said. I have an international health insurance plan. I have a contact at the local expat community who's already introduced me to 6 women who've done exactly this, and I have more money than you assumed I had, which is something I should have known myself a long time ago. I looked at Jade. I also have my mother's recipes, all of them, and I'm taking every single one. I stood up. I thanked Claudette and Yolanda and Inez for coming. I told Marcus to call me when he was ready to have a real conversation, and I went to Claudette's house and helped her with the dishes, and we did not go back until the cars were gone. Marcus called 4 days later. I let it go to voicemail twice. Then I picked up, Mum. His voice was stripped of all the practiced gentleness. He sounded like himself, maybe for the first time in years. I'm sorry doesn't cover it. I know that. But I need you to understand that I knew what I was doing and I did it anyway, and I have to live with that. I know, I said. Did Dad know that I would do something like this? I don't know what your father knew, I said, but I think he suspected the worst and planned for it because that's what a man who loves someone does when he knows he's dying. Marcus was quiet for a long time. I'm in therapy, he said finally. Jade and I aren't together. She left 2 weeks ago. I'm not telling you that so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because I want you to know that I understand now what I was doing, who I had become. I had a wife who wanted a lifestyle and a mother who was a means to an end, and I let those things become more important than you. I don't know how to fix that, but I don't want to not try. I was standing in my almost empty living room, the walls bare, the furniture already in a shipping container, headed for storage in Faro. Outside, the oak tree Leon had planted when Marcus was born was losing its last November leaves. Come to Portugal in the spring, I said. Come alone. Come ready to see me as a person, not just your mother. We'll go from there. I heard him exhale. Thank you, Mum. Don't thank me yet, I said. Earn it. I flew out of Hartsfield-Jackson on December 29th on a direct flight to Lisbon. Business class, because Paulo Ose had said to me, Vera, you are 66 years old and you have not been anywhere in 30 years, and you are crossing an ocean. You are not flying coach. I had argued for about 30 seconds and then agreed. Josephine Carter met me at arrivals in Lisbon holding a handwritten sign that said 5A AAA with a sunflower drawn next to it. She was shorter than I expected, with natural hair going silver and a laugh that arrived before she did. She hugged me like we were old friends, which I suppose we already were. The drive south to Cavairo took about 3 hours. The landscape opened up slowly, flat and golden. Cork oak trees and orange groves, and then, finally, the coast. The Atlantic, enormous and blue-green, catching the late afternoon light. Is this real? I kept asking. This is your life now, Josephine kept answering. The house was everything the photos had promised and a few things they hadn't. The lemon tree in the courtyard was laden with fruit. The terracotta floors were cool underfoot. The bedroom windows faced east, toward the water, and in the morning the light came in gold and clean and woke me gently at 7 without any alarm. My first week I got lost 3 times trying to find the market. I mispronounced everything. I accidentally bought anchovies when I wanted sardines and ate them anyway because I was not about to waste food. The loneliness at night was real. Not the devastating kind, but the quiet kind that comes when you've spent 34 years sleeping beside someone and then you don't. I talked to Leon sometimes out loud on the courtyard. I figure he could hear me wherever he was. By my third week, Josephine had introduced me to her group, 7 women, all black, all American, all over 55, all living their second lives on Portuguese soil. There was Odessa, 63, a retired pediatrician from Houston who painted watercolors and had opinions about everything. There was Marlene with the natural hair, a different Marlene than any I'd known before, and trust me, I noticed her when Josephine said the name. 60, retired federal judge from D.C., absolutely terrifying in the best possible way. There was Corinne, 58, from Chicago, who had opened a small cake business out of her kitchen and whose brown butter pound cake made me close my eyes. They called themselves the Algarve Aunties. I was welcomed at the first dinner like I'd been expected. "You're Vera May," Odessa said when we met. "Joe told us about you, the nurse who sold her house out from under her son's feet." She grinned. "We've been waiting for you." I brought macaroni and cheese to that dinner. Same recipe, 4 cheeses baked, breadcrumb top. Corinne tasted it and put down her fork and looked at me very seriously and said, "Vera, have you considered a restaurant?" I laughed. I haven't cooked for money since I was 19, waiting tables at a diner in East Atlanta. "You're cooking for us for free right now," Marlene said. "That seems like the same problem." Within 2 months, I had started teaching a cooking class twice a week out of my kitchen. 6 students, mostly expats, 1 Portuguese woman who wanted to learn American Southern food because she'd had a life-changing experience with a biscuit somewhere in Nashville. She was a good student, quick hands. On the day she made her first proper pan gravy without any help, she looked up at me and said, "This is magic." "That's not magic," I told her. "That's patience and fat and not being afraid of a little heat." She came back every week after that. Marcus arrived in May. He came through the Faro airport looking smaller than I remembered, thinner, with his father's eyes and a nervousness around them that I hadn't seen since he was a teenager, asking me for something he wasn't sure I'd give. We didn't hug right away. We stood for a moment and looked at each other, 2 people who had hurt each other and been hurt, deciding whether to bridge the distance. Then I opened my arms and he walked into them and held on. We drove the coastal road to Caveiro. He didn't speak for a long time, just watched the cliffs and the water. "Mum," he finally said, "this is where you live." "This is where I live." He was quiet. "Then it's so much bigger than I thought, than I imagined for you." "I know," I said. "I think that's the point." The Algarve Aunties had a group dinner on his second night. Josephine answered the door and looked at Marcus the way a woman who loves someone deeply looks at the person who hurt them. "With a son." "Yes, ma'am." "You're here." "Yes, ma'am." "Come in." She stood aside. "We'll see about the rest." They were not unkind to him. They were honest, which is sometimes harder. Odessa asked him what he had learned. Corinne asked him what he was doing to make it right. Marlene, who had seen the worst of human behavior from the bench, said almost nothing, just watched, which Marcus told me later was more frightening than anything else. At one point, I overheard him say to Josephine while they were clearing dishes, "She's different here. She's so herself." Jo looked at him. "She was always herself. You just weren't paying attention." We walked to the beach the next morning, Marcus and I. The tide was coming in. He told me about his therapy, the work he was doing, the ways he was beginning to understand how he'd seen me not as a person, but as a permanent fixture. He cried twice. I let him. I told him about his father, The whole story, the lockbox, the letter, what Leon had built in silence over 30 years of careful saving. Marcus listened without speaking, and when I finished he was quiet for a long time. He knew, Marcus finally said. He knew he had to protect you from me. He knew he had to protect me, period. I don't think he knew exactly what would happen. I think he just knew the world, and he knew that a woman alone needs something solid under her feet. We sat in silence. The Atlantic moved. I have one more thing to tell you, Marcus said. He reached into his jacket and took out an envelope. From the people who bought the house. They asked me to bring it to you. Inside was a letter and 2 photographs. The photos showed a nursery, yellow walls, white furniture, a mobile of small golden stars hanging above a crib. The letter was handwritten on cream paper. Dear Mrs. Holloway, we moved into our new home in December, into the house you built with love over 30 years. On March 8th, our daughter was born in the bedroom that faces the backyard. We named her Leonora Vera Washington, after strength and roots and the woman who grew those roses that are already blooming again. We promised to take care of this home the way it deserves. With deep gratitude, Simone and David Washington. I held those photographs for a long time. A baby named after my husband and me, sleeping in a room where Leon and I had whispered to each other in the dark for decades. That's your legacy, Mom, Marcus said softly. Not the money, not the house, her. I looked at the ocean. Somewhere behind us, up the cliff road, my courtyard lemon tree was full. Next Tuesday, I had a cooking class. Saturday, there was a bocce tournament by the port that Odessa had been training for with almost frightening intensity and had invited me to watch. I had 47 pages of something that might become a book. I know, I said. We walked back up the cliff path together, my son and I, the way forward longer than what was behind us, and that felt exactly right. 1 year after arriving in Portugal, I woke before my alarm to the sound of the Atlantic and the smell of the espresso that my landlord's wife, Maria, left outside my door in a little thermos every morning. As a kindness I'd stopped trying to refuse. I took it to the courtyard. The lemon tree was full again. The bougainvillea I'd planted in February had climbed halfway up the south wall and was deeply committed to covering the rest. My phone had messages. Josephine, happy 1 year, Vera May. Show up for bocce by 9. Odessa needs a warm-up audience. Marcus 1 year, Mom. I'm proud of you. I love you. Claudette, from her kitchen indicator at 5 in the morning, because she is that kind of friend. Thinking about you today, baby. You did what we all wish we had the nerve to do. Corinne, in our cooking class group chat, today's class is cancelled because today we celebrate 5 dinner at mine at 7. I sat in the courtyard and drank my coffee and let the April sun come over the wall. And I thought about the woman who had been told she was in the wrong season of her life, who had been offered a pool and a book club and organised activities as a consolation prize for giving up everything she'd built. A year later, I was teaching, I was cooking, I was walking the coastal path every morning. I was learning Portuguese badly and laughing about it freely. I had friends who knew me, not as someone's wife or someone's mother or the charge nurse on the 3rd floor, but as Vera May, the woman with the macaroni and cheese who could keep a lemon tree alive and who was learning, at 67, that patience applied to your own life the same way it applied to a proper pan gravy. You cannot rush it. You cannot be afraid of the heat. You have to stay with it until it's ready. I raised my coffee cup to the morning. Leon, I said aloud, you would have loved it here. The bougainvillea rustled in a breeze off the water, and I chose, as I always did now, to believe that was him answering. To every woman who has been handed a brochure for a smaller life, you don't have to take it. Find your own place. It might surprise you what you find when you finally start looking. I think about Jade a lot actually, not with anger anymore, that passed somewhere over the Atlantic, but with a kind of clarity that only comes when you've put enough distance between yourself and a situation to see it whole. She was not a villain in some simple story. She was a young woman who had learned that the world rewards people who take boldly and ask forgiveness never, and she applied that lesson with precision. What she didn't account for was that I had spent 30 years as a charge nurse, and a charge nurse learns one thing above everything else: you do not get to be careless with people's lives and walk away clean. Every choice has a consequence that is proportional and patient. It will find you. It always does. Marcus knew what he was doing. That matters to me, not to punish him with it forever, but because pretending otherwise would be a lie, and I have spent too much of my life being comfortable with lies that protected other people's feelings at the cost of my own. He made a deliberate decision to redirect his father's legacy into his own pocket. He made a deliberate decision to stand in the doorway of my kitchen while his wife told me to take my mother's cooking somewhere else, and he said nothing. Those choices had consequences. Not because I engineered them that way, but because that is simply how things work. You hollow out the foundation long enough, and eventually the house comes down, and you are standing in the rubble wondering what happened. What I know now, at 67, living in a house in Portugal with a lemon tree in the courtyard, and students who come twice a week to learn how to make pan gravy without fear. What I know is that Leon understood something I never gave him full credit for. He understood that love without wisdom is just sentiment. He loved me for 34 years, and he also thought carefully, planned methodically, and quietly built something that nobody could take from me, even when I couldn't be bothered to protect myself. That combination, the love and the thinking behind it, is what saved me. Feeling alone was never going to be enough. And my own part in this, I have to be honest about it. I signed papers I didn't read. I let things go that I should have named out loud. I confused keeping the peace with keeping my dignity, and those are not the same thing at all. For too many years, I treated endurance like it was a virtue, when really it was just fear, dressed up in patience's clothes. The strength I found in the end wasn't new. It had always been there. I just had to stop apologizing for taking up space before I could use it. What I want for anyone who hears this story, and I mean this plainly, the way I used to mean things when I was standing at a patient's bedside at 2 a.m. with no soft language available, is this: know what you have. Not just the money, not just the legal documents, but the accumulated weight of your own life, the skills you carry, the history you hold, the table you can still set. Know it, protect it. And when someone looks at everything you've built and calls it dead weight, understand that what they are really saying is that they cannot figure out how to take it from you yet. Find your own place. It is waiting. It might have a lemon tree.